Hello, and welcome to 10 Kids, 2 Docs Parenting Insights from Pediatrician Moms. I'm Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Vivian Carlin. So, first of all, I don't know if you know this, Sylvia, but my favorite age to parent and to care for medically is teenagers. So,
Really?
yes. So, when I was in residency, I seriously considered doing a fellowship in adolescent medicine because I just really love teens.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's my favorite population in medicine as well as parenting.
For me, the teenage girl is one of my favorite patient populations to deal with as
Ah,
well. I feel like oftentimes when you talk to a teen, they can be a puzzle. It's a challenge when you approach a teen because as an authority figure and an adult, they're often very closed to you.
yeah,
And the puzzle part of pediatrics and teens is once you crack the puzzle, it they open up.
right.
It is just below the surface wanting to come out,
Mhm.
and if you approach them correctly, ask the right questions, empathize in the proper way, it is then you really get to see who they are underneath.
So today will be our first episode concerning teenagers, specifically how to inspire drive in our teenagers.
Great, let's get started.
Welcome to the 10 Kids, 2 Docs podcast. Seasoned pediatricians and longtime friends, Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin have counseled thousands of parents and are raising 4 and 6 kids, respectively. Join these doctor moms as they incorporate fun and their combined wisdom and experience to share parenting insights for anyone looking for practical and trustworthy guidance. Please note that this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment from your doctor.
Yeah, so Sylvia, why don't you start us out?
Yes, as many of the listeners know, I am a second generation Asian American. So my parents had a lot of parenting styles that were similar to this tiger mom parenting that I think a lot of Americans have read about and know about.
By the way, I read Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother early on in my parenting, and I was fascinated by it. And there were parts
Yes.
of it where I'm like, "Ooh, I like that."
Why don't you summarize what tiger parenting is just to kind of give people a little bit of background from where I came from?
Okay, perfect. As long as you'll correct me on where I'm wrong. But my memories from reading that book, because it was really eye opening for me, was this idea of being very, very thoughtful and purposeful in directing your children towards activities, academics, etc., that would best set them up for success, like success
Right.
beyond what they're going to achieve by just sort of going with the flow, really directing them, and then going to an extreme. This is where I think the tiger part comes in, going to an extreme of then figuring out how to do those activities and academics to the absolute most competitive level, best level, standout level. And at the time when I read that, I was homeschooling, and I really like this idea of being able to figure out for each child how to maximize their academics. This is something you can do homeschooling. So that was super appealing to me.
Yeah. I think the other dimension, the part in that story that I think in your description that's missing is how you get your child to do those things.
Oh, yes.
It's not just the plan of, I
Mhm.
think we should take these courses, do these activities, do these extracurriculars, and I've tigered you up. It's how does the parent get the child to do that?
Okay.
And
Oh, this is a great thing for us to discuss because what I'm remembering about the book is the idea of
yes,
the parent being very, very purposeful and thoughtful in directing their child, but not
right.
having grown up with a tiger mom. I
Mhm.
did not take away the amount of pressure that was put on the child and the
Right.
consequences.
And
Yes.
I think every Asian child in
Mm.
America that has been raised this way has something to say about that technique. Okay, so I think this may be the gist of our topic today, that drive to motivation. So let me give you a little bit background of the story. So my oldest child is in middle school. He's a super laid back kid. The first part of tiger parenting. Let's look at the report card. Let's look at the A's. The joke is a B is an Asian F. Like there is nothing but A's,
These are like
so,
inside jokes that I don't know.
this I think there are listeners that will know these things, Asian F. So, my son is doing well. He has some adjustment to middle school like every child does. We're getting the report card and he comes back with a report card and he has 2 Bs, right? Which, as I said, are Asian Fs.
Okay.
And the gist of this story actually doesn't involve the child at all. It
Yeah.
actually involves an extensive discussion between me and my husband. So we're having a discussion about how to move forward with our parenting. We are debating how do we motivate this child, right? And I snap right into tiger mom mode, right?
Mm,
Like this is the way that I was raised. This is the way that it is done. We should just take away his privileges until he achieves the A.
mm,
Like, start restricting, like, let's cut his screen time. Let's take away his social interaction. Like, you can't
mhm.
go out with your friends until you achieve X in school. Their social media, they take away the phone
Yeah.
altogether. And so my knee jerk reaction to this, let's punish. Let's punish him
Mhm,
until he gets good grades. How do we motivate our child to achieve to his potential in school because we
mhm.
thought he could do better. So, this seemed like a no-brainer to me. Like, how are we going to implement this, punishment reward system? And it took me aback because my husband was completely not on board with this.
Mm.
And it really surprised me because I just assumed that he would have a similar, aggressive type of goal setting for our children as I know that he had for himself.
I think you should mention that your husband came from a different cultural background.
Yeah. Yeah. My husband is not Asian. He has a Eastern European heritage and, this tiger parenting wasn't the way that he was raised.
Mhm,
So when he disagreed with my proposal to punish our child to get better grades, I was dumbfounded. He was reading a book called Drive, Drive. And
mm,
it's not a parenting book. It's actually a book about the workplace and
mhm.
how to motivate your employees in a workplace setting. But he was extrapolating some of those themes from the book that he was reading to parenting.
Interesting.
And what the book basically highlights is that you want to instill in someone an internal drive, an
Mhm,
internal motivation that will lead to productivity and success, as opposed to dangling a carrot in front of the child and they're achieving because they want the carrot.
right.
And, you know, my big take home message and my big argument with this finding his internal drive was what if that drive just never kicks in? My worst case scenario is he is living in our basement as a 30-year-old person because there is no internal drive, right? And that was my main argument against his proposed parenting method. And, he was very against the carrot dangling, having the reward be the drive.
Mhm,
Because according to this book, and it makes perfect sense, once the reward is not there anymore,
mhm.
the drive is not there. And I think the biggest question about that was how?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
How
yeah.
how how does a parent inspire that internal drive? Is it my responsibility as a parent to help them find that drive?
Right.
Where is my parenting role here then, if
Mhm.
this is the way that we are going to parent our teenagers?
So I love that story, and I think the big question in my mind is how do we do that? So let's turn our attention to some practical guidance on how do we encourage internal drive in our teenagers. So how do we encourage internal drive in our teenagers? I think we can break this down into 3 practical ways to do this. The first is we have to encourage joint decision making. So as much as
Mhm.
possible, we're going to have a conversation with our teens to encourage us together to make a decision. The second point that we really want to encourage in our children, this mindset of being process driven and not results driven. So in other words, the school system is very results oriented, right? Get all A's, be in this class rank so that you have this automatic admission to this university. But for our teenagers, we want them to appreciate the value of being process oriented. And we'll explain more about that as we go through. And the third is that as parents, we need to adjust our expectations based on our teen and them as an individual, as well as the culture that they're growing up in.
So I really feel like part of the beginning of teenage drive is their buy in. And I'll give you an example of this. It often is in the context of parents having a joint discussion in order to outline what the choices are. They're still new at making these decisions and it's hard for them to have full perspective. So the parental part is to paint the decision. What are you deciding? What are your choices here? And then after the teen has decided, then there's more of a buy-in to say like, okay, I've decided this path. Now I'm actually going to do it because I was part of the decision making process.
Mhm.
So after one of my high schoolers, finished their sophomore year, we were kind of looking at the coursework and what we had planned on taking junior year, which, as a lot of listeners know, is a very difficult and tough year for high school students. So at the end of sophomore year, we were actually going out to dinner, and I mentioned to my teen, "Hey, let's think about the classes that you're enrolled in next year. We might want to make a different decision here." And it really took my teen aback. I don't think that he realized that there wasn't even a decision to be made. But I kind of outlined, it didn't really seem like you liked, your foreign language as much. Was there some other course that you might like to pursue? And it was this step where he was like, yeah, I really didn't like that. And we had a discussion about what he might pursue. So I feel like there was more of a buy-in entering junior year, and the tough classes that he decided, no, I really want to take that one. There was also that buy-in to say,
Mhm.
yes, you've now actively decided that you wanted to take this. So there was more of a drive junior year because there was more of a discussion and control over his schedule and a reevaluation.
Yeah, I like that story because it highlights things that we need to recognize with our teens. One is that they have a desire to make decisions. They are struggling with their independence, and a lot of teens want to exert that as much as they can. They want to be the ones making the decision. But yet we as parents recognize, number one, they don't always appreciate or recognize the options that are available to them. And the other thing is they're often not great at looking ahead to the consequences of their actions either. So
Yeah.
you have that ability to look and say, hey, you don't seem to like this path of classes. Are you sure you want to spend another year doing that? Let's think that through. So I have stories that come to mind with this tension of wanting to guide your teen to reach this high potential achievement, but also really wanting to guide them to be able to make decisions for the rest of their life towards the best goals for them, which may not necessarily correlate with the highest level of achievement. When my son in high school talked about his desire to take AP Spanish, which is exceptionally commendable, he
Yeah.
knew that that was going to be a GPA killer for him. And I really appreciated about my son that he would just very matter of fact say, the grade isn't what's important. It's the fact that this is the class that I will use for the rest of my life. And that's so much
Mhm.
more important to me than all these other classes you're making me take in high school. He was very
Right.
much like, I don't want to play the game. I want to do what's right as far as what I want to study and pursuing my education.
How do you think that internal drive happened for him?
I think it was partially me recognizing that his goals were different than what I would have put on him and appreciating who he was as a broader person.
And it was almost like his internal drive helped shape your parenting of him, because I don't think he would have done well with being told or dictated what to do. Sometimes being results oriented winds up backfiring. My children go to public school and it's very academically aggressive. And what my children and I have observed as they are going through high school and being more and more results oriented, that the process of learning is no longer valued.
Yeah.
There is a desire to have some sort of study guide of all the answers beforehand, to ask other students what the answers were to the midterm who took it earlier, to kind of go about
Mhm.
getting the results. And I feel like this winds up being undermining and backfiring as to what's the purpose of school is. Is it the person who can best search the internet for the practice test that matches with the teacher guide?
Yeah, yeah.
Or is it the child that actually sits there, studies the material, and learns something and does well on the test? In this day and age, with such availability of resources and the internet, there are a lot more ways that academic dishonesty can occur. And when you're so results oriented, it becomes so much more tempting to pursue that route to achieve those results.
Oh, that's such a good point. We could do a whole episode on the culture of academic dishonesty. And this all stems back to, are we results oriented or process oriented? So I think,
Right.
again, this is part of establishing that internal drive in our teens. We are like looking to encourage in them a process oriented approach. And then I think the last one that we should talk about is this idea of adjusting our expectations, or at least like giving serious thought to what are our expectations as parents for our children.
Sure. Like every parent out there has secret hopes and dreams for their child. The moment they hold their infant in their hand,
Mhm.
for the first time, they think like, "Is this the next president of the United States?
Yeah,
Am I holding the next gold medalist Olympian?" It is very natural for parents to have expectations, if not unrealistic expectations for their children. I think that's inherent to parenting. But I feel like part of the adjusting expectations, especially in the teenage years, is related to giving your child the space to find their drive and have expectations for themselves.
yeah. I think of a few things related to this. I mean, first off, maybe it's because I have so many children. I recognize, like, what do I really hope for my children? Okay, well, first of all, as a Christian, I do hope that they love the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, and mind. That's the greatest commandment. The second commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. If I boil that down to a secular perspective, if I just have six functioning adults who are positively contributing to society, law abiding citizens, I will not take that for granted, right? I am willing to set the bar that low. If I have all six come out as functional adults who can positively contribute to society, that is a win. I don't feel like
Mhm.
in this day and age, we should take that, what quote unquote normal is, for granted in any way. And I like to acknowledge with my teens when we're having these discussions around decision making, I admit to them the culture that they're growing up in is different than what
Mhm.
I was growing up in. This mental health crisis, the issues around their safety that we mentioned in the pilot, the influences of social media and the ubiquitous technology. I mean, these are all different from when I was a teen and the things that I was working through as a teen. So I like to like grant them the grace that I can't fully understand, right? That I need to hear from them and learn from them. When I think over the years of my parenting, I can think of a couple of examples, but one that comes to mind is I have one child that has that natural athleticism, can quickly learn whatever sport this child wants to do. And I felt like there was a season in his early adolescence where, in my mind, it was very clear what sport was the right combo of his natural athleticism, his body type, his mental focus type. And I was like, hey, I'm in, let's go pursue this sport. And he, very much to my surprise, after having demonstrated success in that sport, was like, you know, I'm good. I don't think I want to play that sport anymore. We're like, what? You're going to just stop and give that up? And he was like, yeah, I want to try something else. Okay, being process oriented and not results oriented, that is a wonderful decision. As adults, like how wonderful to feel the freedom to like, I want to go try something new. I may not be great at it, but this looks fun. Let me go do it, right? He was not focused on the result of where will I be the highest achieving athlete. He was focused on the process of I have fun trying new things. I want to try something new. So we have a like discussion around that, and I have to let go of my expectations for trying to drive my child to be the sports star that I want. And I have to appreciate that joint decision making. I came to actually really appreciate this aspect of who he was, even though as a parent along the way, I had to adjust my expectations of like, ooh, you could receive accolade from the world in this or that. And I'm going to let that go because that's not important to you. And maybe it shouldn't be important to me either, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I like this story because I feel like for some parents, that first piece of advice that we're giving, the joint decision making, the vibe that you're setting in your household to allow your child to have joint decision making gives them the opportunity to even voice that, hey, I don't really like this. And I think that's an important part in driving him. I'm sure after he made the choice, he was very driven. And I feel like in this story, the other difficult parental part was the adjustment of expectation. You know, you definitely saw his potential in this other sport
Mm,
to achieve quite highly. And as a parent, to then say, okay, that's okay. This potential is not going to be met. And as a parent, I'm okay with that. And I'm going to support you in your decision making. That's also very difficult.
right, right.
So these are the key things that parents have trouble doing, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Allowing the joint decision making and letting your parental expectation take the back seat. And when you force your expectation or you do not allow them to make joint decisions, that is usually when fights happen with parents and teens, right?
Yeah. So I think with that story, with a lot of the stories we told, it can definitely be our place as parents to have a discussion with our child around the idea of, okay, this is the potential I see. This is what you stand to gain by pursuing this path. This is what you stand to lose or to give up by not pursuing this path. But I think ideally that discussion happens in this idea of joint decision making, not based on my parental expectations, and is a
Hmm.
decision we can come to together, but that I've given them the information. This is the path and the potential I see. Let me tell you that. But in the end, if you decide that's not what you want, I need to respect that.
Right. And then at the end, once their decision is made, whatever path that they take, then there's internal drive to
Yes.
pursue that path. Right. This was our first recording at trying to crack that teenager code. Obviously, all the answers weren't given today. And of course, there are so many things that we need to talk about, such as when that internal drive does not kick in, when they're actually making decisions that you actively disagree with or think are bad choices. I hope that in future episodes we can cover all these topics. But for now, let's just close it and say if we can try to engage our teens in joint decision making, try to help them think about the process, not just the results, and think critically about our own personal parental expectations. That's a big step towards communicating with our teens.
Awesome. This is 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Vivian Carlin.
And I'm Sylvia Bank. See you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to 10 Kids 2 Docs, hosted and created by Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and recommend our podcast to other listeners. Visit our website at 10kids2docs.com, where you can find links to social media and leave comments or suggestions. Back next week with more topics in parenting.